Time magazine called him the unsung hero behind the internet. CNN called him a father of the internet. President Bill Clinton called him one of the great minds of the information age. He has been voted history's greatest scientist of African descent. He is Philip Emeagwali. He's coming to Trinidad and Tobago to launch the 2008 Kwame Ture lecture series on Sunday, June 8th at the JFK Auditorium, UWI St. Augustine, 5 p.m. The Emancipation Support Committee invites you to come and hear this inspirational mind address the theme, crossing new frontiers to conquer today's challenges. This lecture is one you cannot afford to miss. Admission is free, so be there on Sunday, June 8th, 5 p.m. at the JFK Auditorium, UWI St. Augustine.
Looking back to the mid-1970s in Oregon, United States, I was coming of age and growing in my awareness that abstract equations, whether algebraic or differential, must be used to discover and recover otherwise elusive crude oil and natural gas, and recover them from the mile-deep oil fields of the southeastern region of Nigeria. Mathematics is the invincible and abstract weapon that is used to fight poverty in Africa. My quest for the fastest supercomputer took me from the first supercomputer that could execute 1 million instructions per second that was at 1800 Southwest Campus Way, Corvallis, Oregon, United States, to an ensemble of 64 binary thousand commodity off-the-shelf processors that was in Los Alamos, New Mexico, United States. In the 1970s and 80s, I was a researcher in search for the massively parallel supercomputer that I hoped will become the world's fastest computer. In theory, the grand challenge question was this: how can we execute infinite calculations and do so across a large but finite number of processors, or across an internet and complete it in finite time? The answer is that it will always be impossible to execute infinite calculations. But in 1989, I was in the news headlines because I discovered the practical answer to that grand challenge question. Namely, I figured out how we could reduce 180 years or 65,536 days of time to solution across a new internet, that is a new global network of 65,536 processors. That is not a supercomputer per se, but that is a new internet de facto. An important problem that takes 180 years of time to solution is classified by the US government as a grand challenge problem. That grand challenge problem is solvable in 180 years, but is unsolvable in one day. In 1989, I was in the news headlines because I discovered how to reduce that time to solution from 180 years on one computer to just one day across a new internet, that is a new global network of 64 binary thousand processors. The reason I was able to solve the once impossible to solve problem was that I asked basic questions about how never before seen supercomputers could compute extraordinarily fast and apply that speed to solve the toughest problems arising in STEM fields. I discovered that the modern supercomputer must parallel process across millions upon millions of processors and must do so to solve as many initial boundary value problems of mathematical physics. In retrospect, it's incredible that parallel supercomputing, the vital technology that was mocked, ridiculed, and dismissed as a huge waste of everybody's time, is now benefiting everybody. Parallel processing, or solving many problems at once, is the irreducible essence of the modern supercomputer. In the 1970s, the parallel supercomputer was mocked and ridiculed and dismissed as useless and clumsy. That was the reason I conducted my research, my parallel supercomputer research alone. I programmed supercomputers alone because it was believed that it will forever remain impossible to harness an ensemble of 8 or more processors and use it to achieve a speed increase of a factor of 8 or more, and achieve that speed increase when solving the toughest problems arising in mathematical physics. Parallel processing was dismissed as the end of the road in the never-ending quest for the faster supercomputer. After my discovery that occurred on the 4th of July 1989 and that made the news headlines, the modern supercomputer that is the world's fastest had to parallel process across millions upon millions of processors that shared nothing. What kept me moving forward and alone? During my parallel processing research that I did in the United States and did in the 1970s and 80s was my visceral feeling that the computer is older than myself and that the supercomputer is larger than myself. On the 4th of July 1989, I discovered how parallel processing makes the supercomputer super. Parallel processing is vital to the computer and supercomputer. My contribution to the development of the supercomputer is this. I figured out how to harness the fastest massively parallel supercomputer ever. That discovery of parallel processing is used every day in every supercomputer. Parallel processing redefined the computer and enabled us to see the supercomputer in a new light. In the 1980s, I was perhaps the world's leading consumer of algebraic equations. I was solving a world record system of 24 million equations of algebra and solving that system at the then unheard of supercomputer speed of 24 million equations that I solved during each cycle and with 7 cycles completed during each second. Doing so enabled me to record the world's fastest computation as of the 4th of July 1989. I was in the news because I discovered the fastest computer speeds and did so on a virtual supercomputer that was not a computer per se. I discovered the fastest computer speeds across a new internet. That's a new global network of 65,536 central processing units, with each processor operating its own operating system and sharing nothing. In 1989, it made the news headlines that a Nigerian supercomputer genius in the United States had experimentally discovered how a new internet, that is a new global network of 65,536 CPUs, could be harnessed and used to synchronously solve a system of 24 million algebraic equations that arose in extreme scale computational physics, and do so per email cycle and iterate 7 email cycles per second. I did so across that new internet to record the world's fastest supercomputer calculation. I, Philip Emeagwali, was that Nigerian supercomputer scientist that was in the news back in 1989. My discovery of the parallel supercomputer was also highlighted in the June 20, 1990 issue of the Wall Street Journal. My contribution to the development of the supercomputer is this. In the 1980s, when the parallel supercomputer was mocked, ridiculed, and dismissed as a huge waste of everybody's time, I discovered that grand challenge problems arising in computational physics that are impossible to solve on a conventional supercomputer is possible to solve across the millions upon millions of commodity off-the-shelf processors that outline and define the parallel supercomputer. My discovery of parallel processing became newsworthy because I experimentally proved that I can perform the then world record 3.1 billion calculations per second and execute them across a new internet that is a new global network of 65,536 central processing units. Each processor performed only 47,303 calculations per second. I achieved 7 cycles of 65,536 simultaneous emails per second. In 1989, I parallel processed around the clock, or 24/7. In that year, I had 2 mental images of my virtual supercomputer that was not a computer per se. I'm not bound by a contract to describe the parallel supercomputer that I invented in 1989 and describe that new supercomputer for the understanding of the conventional supercomputer scientists of the late 1940s. Nor do I have to describe that new supercomputer in the exact sense that I understood it when I conceived it in the 1970s. I described my inventions in the light of newer understandings. The word computer was first used in print 2,000 years ago and first used by the Roman author Pliny the Elder. The word computer meant different things to Jesus Christ and to Philip Emeagwali. My first modern supercomputer was a parallel processing machinery that was a new global network of 65,536 central processing units, or a new internet. I discovered how to use that first supercomputer to perform the world's fastest calculations and do so while solving the toughest problems arising in STEM fields. My second supercomputer is the sister parallel processing machinery that was first published as the science fiction story of 64,000 human computers and published back on February 1, 1922, and in the book Weather Prediction by Numerical Process. My contribution to the development of the supercomputer is this. I theorized that science fiction as my reality that was comprised of my new global network of 65,536 or 64 binary thousand tightly coupled commodity processors that tightly encircled a globe in the way the internet does. The black inventor must fight hard to get credit for his invention. I am no exception. In the 1980s, I invented a new supercomputer that was new because it was defined by a never-before-seen processor-to-processor configuration. That new supercomputer was also a new internet de facto. The greatest contribution of the black inventor, and the reason he or she is the subject of school reports, is that his or her contributions to science and technology changed the narrative of white intellectual supremacy. I found it troublesome that even though there's only one body of scientific knowledge, America's history of slavery and Jim Crow segregation de facto created artificial distinctions between what I, as a black scientist, can contribute to human knowledge and what a white scientist can contribute. In 1989, I discovered how to harness a new global network of 64 binary thousand processors and how to use them to solve the toughest problems arising in STEM fields. I was able to make my discovery of practical parallel processing and do so because I visualized my ensemble of processors as evenly distributed around my globe that I defined in 16-dimensional hyperspace. I visualized each processor as separated by equal distances from 16 nearest neighboring processors. For planet Earth, that has a diameter of 7,917.5 miles, each of my 65,536 processors would cover an area of about 3,000 square miles. I metaphorically visualized that new supercomputer that I used to experimentally discover practical parallel processing. My metaphor for my new supercomputer was a cube in an imaginary 16-dimensional universe. I visualized supercomputing with 65,536 central processing units that I visualized as evenly distributed at each of the 2 raised to power 16 or 65,536 vertices of that cube that I visualized in 16-dimensional hyperspace. I visualized my 16 pairs of bidirectional email wires as emanating from each vertex of the cube and in the 16 perpendicular directions, that is along the 16 edges that emanated from each vertex. For that specific configuration, my parallel processing ensemble had 1,048,576 short email wires that I visualized as uniformly distributed on the surface of a globe in a 16-dimensional universe. The parallel supercomputer wizardry that made the news headlines back in 1989 was that I parallel processed across a new internet that was a new global network of 65,536 central processing units. In effect, I parallel processed blindfolded and did so without seeing any of those processors with my naked eyes. It was for a good reason that I parallel processed alone. Back in the 1980s, the reason was that parallel supercomputing was then dismissed as impossible. Please allow me to put the parallel supercomputer in the perspective of the 1970s. Back then, solving a grand challenge problem and solving it by dividing it into 1 billion smaller problems and solving them while maintaining a one problem to one processor correspondence and doing so with 1 billion processors was a very terrifying thought. That was the reason no sane supercomputer scientist attempted to solve the grand challenge problem. That sense of foreboding prompted the Computer World magazine to carry a negative article on the future of the parallel supercomputer. That article was published in its June 14, 1976 issue and was titled, quote, "Research in Parallel Processing, questioned as waste of time," unquote. In the 1970s, to parallel process through invincible 2 raised to power 16 or 65,536 central processing units that encircled a globe in a 16-dimensional hyperspace was like searching for 2 raised to power 16 black boxes that were equal distances apart and on the surface of a globe that was in a dark 16-dimensional universe. I had to visualize the exact locations of each and every central processing unit that I must parallel process across before I could harness that processor to solve a computation-intensive grand challenge problem. As the first and the only full-time parallel processing supercomputer scientist of the 1980s, I had no competitor when it came to giving lectures on how to solve 1,000,000 problems at once or in parallel. In the 1980s, a pattern of invitation that was followed by disinvitation emerged. In the United States, I will be invited to give a seminar lecture on a parallel supercomputer and invited by telephone. When the seminar organizers discover that I am Black and African, they will find a pretext to disinvite me from delivering my lecture on the massively parallel supercomputer, even though I was the only person in the world that could teach them how to solve a grand challenge problem and do so by chopping it up into 1,000,000 smaller problems and solving them with a one problem to one processor correspondent mapping. After several disinvitations, I learned to disguise my identity as a Black African and pass as a white person in the field of supercomputing. For that reason, many supercomputer scientists of the 1980s thought that I was from Eastern Europe and presumed that I was white, and were shocked when they met me on February 28, 1990 in San Francisco, California, the date and place I was awarded the top prize in the field of supercomputing. The IEEE committee that gave me the top prize for my contributions to practical parallel supercomputing would have revoked that prize if they had discovered before the award ceremony that I was Black and African. Everybody was shocked when I stood up to receive that supercomputer prize. That prize is won by a team of up to 50 supercomputer scientists. I am the supercomputer scientist to win that prize alone. Thank you.
Insightful and brilliant lecture.